Hi, I'm Carter. I love talking about movies, music, comics, and games. I just got out of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, filmed my spoiler-free review, and I just decided to do a quick spoiler review on this one because there are some things that I liked and some things I didn't like that are very spoilery and I didn't want to get into. But if you've seen the movie, feel free to stick around. If you haven't, I would recommend watching the movie first, or if you don't care about spoilers, come on in. I'm fine with that. But overall, like I said in my spoiler-free review, I liked the movie. I thought it was very fun. King is an amazing addition to the franchise wherever they go with him. Scott is great in this movie. And Janet are great in this movie. And, it has its problems with tone, a few characters here and there, and a few things in the third act. But overall, I thought it was great. So I'm just kind of run through the movie start to finish, what I remember, what bothered me, what I liked. I'll probably skip over massive amounts of movie, especially in the middle where the pacing slows down a little bit, but again, nothing huge or spoilerific happens, so here we go. So the movie starts out with Kang crash landing in the quantum realm. You don't know anything else, it just shows him crash landing, and the movie cuts back to present day. And in present day, Scott Lang has written a book, he's on tour for it, he's a celebrity, he's happy, he's dating Hope, and she has her company that she took over from Hank, and Cassie hangs out with Hank and Janet and Hope, and Scott doesn't really know what's going on in his daughter's life. He seems like he's more wrapped up in, being an Avenger and everything that comes with that, even though he doesn't do much avenging or saving. He's concerned. Gets concerned though when he's reading his book, and then he gets a call from a jail, and Cassie has been imprisoned for stopping a peaceful protest about the blip, something like that. And then he gets concerned and he talks to her about it, and then there's a good scene in the car where Scott is concerned because he doesn't know much about Cassie's life, and that's kind of a running thing in this movie. He's lost so much time from Cassie's life. That's kind of set up early on. It's just he's missing a lot, he has missed a lot, and he wants to be there for her. However, he's wrapped up in other things, and it seems like she's maybe not that interested in him or his life, and she seems to think of herself as better than him. That's something that kind of bothered me that I didn't talk about in my spoiler-free review, honestly, because I forgot, but now I'm talking about it. It's bothering me. It just comes off as she's a teenage girl, so you don't know who I am, Dad, or whatever. And she's well, I'm good at this. I'm better at this. I had 5 years to learn about it. And I like Ant-Man a lot in the MCU. I like how he interacts with everyone, but everyone treats him kind of like he's an idiot. He's an electrical engineer. I don't think he's an idiot. Probably a lot smarter than I am. But, again, this movie kind of falls into the trap of Scott Lang not being that smart. However, he does get a lot to do in this movie, so I'm not really complaining. Just something to point out. But that happens. They go have dinner with Hank and Janet and Hope. And Cassie brings up that she's been arrested before. And there's a funny scene where Scott's before, what do you mean? And everyone's making fun of him for his book. And I thought everything with the book was really funny throughout. Everyone makes fun of him for it. And it turns out that Hank actually read it and liked it. It's pretty funny. But anyways, one thing leads to another, and they go down to see Cassie's quantum device. And of course, there has to be some plot things with there where they get into the quantum realm. So Janet doesn't say anything, and then Cassie's it sends a signal to the quantum realm, and then Janet's oh my gosh, you have to turn that off, we don't know what's down there. And then they all get sucked into the quantum realm, and Hank, Hope, and Janet get separated from Scott and Cassie. And I think both side stories here were, to me, where the pacing kind of dragged, because both side stories are leading towards Kang. They're building up to the Conqueror, which is pretty freaking sick. But they're building up, and they take their time to establish the world of the quantum realm, which I enjoyed. I enjoyed the world building of this movie, but I think that rewatching this will be the part that most people will skip, most people will play on their phones for, because it's just kind of building out the world of the quantum realm in a good way. But when it's building up towards Kang, you just want to see Kang. It's interesting, but you just want to get to the meat of the movie, which is Kang. And so it's building up, Hank and, I keep wanting to say Scott, Hank and Hope and Janet meet up, and Janet's oh my gosh, there's so much I didn't tell you. And they go meet with Bill Murray, and Bill Murray's I'm human where it counts. That was really funny, actually. Bill Murray and Janet had a fling, and that leads to some of the funniest lines in the movie when they're arguing about it, and they fight, and they discover like Kang is looking for something. And then jumping back to Scott and Cassie, they're wandering around the quantum realm, and then they meet these freedom fighters. And I thought the dialogue with the freedom fighters was just kind of weird. It's really funny when they're trying to get Scott to drink the ooze, and he's like petrified. He doesn't know what's going on. He's like screaming. They all turn out to be really nice, which yeah, haha. But then we get treated to like, Kang built his city on the bones of my people. That the main resistance lady is saying that, and then you kind of get introduced to members of the resistance, and then MODOK attacks. And I enjoyed this part. I thought it was cool to see MODOK doing something cool, and then you get the reveal of what he looks like, and everyone's just making fun of him for it. MODOK looks so goofy, but it's got to be on purpose, because every comic, every show, every time MODOK is in something, they always make fun of his appearance and how weird he looks. He's a floating head with tiny arms and legs. Like, it's just laughable in every medium, and I'm glad they made it laughable here. They could have done the design a little bit better. They could have made him more like gross looking, like how he is in the comics and the Avengers game. But it's fine, honestly. I think most people will probably make fun of that and just poke fun at it because it's a terrible design all around. But it is comic accurate, so who do you blame for that one? But I thought that they tried their best to show MODOK and introduce him. However, I don't think it was necessary. It's a cool idea, but again, like, you could just have Kang, because MODOK doesn't do a ton in this movie. You could just have Kang, honestly, and devote all the MODOK stuff to Kang, which I would prefer. But again, I don't think it's bad, and I'm not a writer, and yeah. I don't know. It's hard for me to make up my mind on some of these things, because it's like I see the good and the bad in them, and I'm just like flip flopping. Like, my friends will be like, "Dude, MODOK looks so stupid." I'm like, "Yeah, he looks terrible." But then I watch the movie and I'm like, he's kind of supposed to look terrible. Like, they make fun of him for it. And I've been watching the Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes show. He looks terrible in that, and they make fun of him for it. They make fun of him for it in everything. So it's like, what are they going for, So again, that's probably issues of tone that they could nail down a little bit. But moving on from that, MODOK captures Scott and Cassie, and they get imprisoned. And they finally meet Kang in one of the best scenes in the movie, where Kang is trying to get Scott to do something for him, trying to get this multiversal core for his time chair. So comic accurate, which is awesome. And Scott's like, "No, I don't think I'm gonna do that. Like, I don't trust you." And then so he immediately starts torturing Scott, and then starts torturing Cassie with his abilities. And I thought that was incredible. Immediately, the tone switches from like, "Oh, are you an Avenger? Have I killed you before?" And then Ant-Man's like, "Oh, me and Thor, get confused all the time," because Kang says, "Are you the one with the hammer?" And then immediately, like, and then within a minute, it switches from Kang like threatening to like rip Cassie apart, and Scott like dropping the whole comedy act and just becoming serious, which I loved. They allowed Paul Rudd to be dramatic in this movie, and it turns out great. So that was awesome. That scene was really, really cool. Definitely a highlight. While this is happening, Hank, I keep wanting to say Scott, Hank, Janet, and Hope are in their ship flying towards the multiversal core. And, well, they're flying towards something. And then Janet tells how she found Kang. And we go back to that scene at the beginning, and it kind of expands on that to where she rescued Kang. She, like, nurses him back to health, and he's a time traveler, and he was exiled. They don't say where he's exiled from. That comes in way later in the movie. And he was exiled from space and time, and so she helps him. And she talks to him about how in Ant-Man and the Wasp, she left and she died, never got to see Hope again when she was a kid. And Kang goes, "I can give you more time. I can help you with that. You can open the door and she'll be there. Or she can open the door and you'll be there. It'll be like you never left." And I thought that was super interesting, because that's something that a lot of people in real life and the MCU would jump on that immediately. That's a chance most people would take like instantly. Was, okay, so you missed this big event, or there's this big thing in your life that you wish you could change. Now you have the chance to do it. And so Janet immediately jumps on that. And I thought this flashback sequence was really well done. Probably some of the strongest writing in the movie, regardless of like, oh, people can say like MacGuffin. I don't care. It's super well done. Very strong writing from Jeff Loveness here, where you see how bad Janet wants to get home. And Janet's narrating this to I keep wanting to say Scott. Janet is narrating this to Hank and Hope, and you can see, she's talking to her family. You know how bad she wants to get home because you've seen it for 3 movies. This is where this comes in, from it being the third chapter in a trilogy. You see it in Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp, how much Janet is missed, how much she is welcomed back, and how much they need her in her life, in their lives. And so you see Janet just jump on this, right? And they try everything, and it's been like years, I think, is what she said. So she and Kang get really close. Like they are friends, and she trusts him. And they finally fix the core, and they go to put it in, and Kang gets his suit back, he gets his powers back, and she goes to put it in, but the chair is controlled by his thoughts. And so she touches the chair, and she just sees like destruction. She sees that he's conquered multiple realities, multiple timelines, killed trillions of people. He's done so much death and destruction, and he sees this, and it's like such a well acted scene because you can see Jonathan Majors is just like distraught because he landed here alone. He's pissed because he's exiled, but he found a friend and he wants to help her. You can see that he genuinely wants to help her, but she's like terrified of him. And so she kind of backs up a little bit, and there's some great dialogue between them, and he just like holds out his hand. He's like, I can give you the time that you need, like come with me. And she's like, are you gonna kill my world? And he says no. So you see that Kang actually likes Janet, which makes her betrayal all the more painful for him, and his hatred for her earned in his own eyes. I thought this scene was incredible. I really loved this scene. This is probably the scene that I wanted to talk about the most in my spoiler-free review. I thought it was way, way, way awesome. Very well acted, very well done, well written. And Janet grabs the core, and Kang just smacks her out of the air because he's incredibly powerful, destroys the house, destroys everything. And then she grabs the Pym discs, throws it at the ground, and blows it up. And you see Kang is just like distraught. And so she says that, and then Kang takes Scott to another part of the quantum realm, the part where Janet blew up the multiversal sphere, and you see it's just destroyed and everything, but the core is still there, and he wants Scott to go in and shrink it down because Kang can't shrink, so he needs the Pym particles. And again, he threatens Cassie if Scott doesn't do it. So Scott jumps in and goes and dives down. And this was an interesting part of the movie. It wasn't like, it was a very interesting part of the trailer because you see Scott separate into 2 people. And so that separates. It's a very quick scene. It was a lot quicker than I expected. You see him separate, and then at the same time, Wasp gets there, and she hears Scott on the comms. So she jumps out of the ship, flies in, and Scott is like, there's thousands of Scotts, and there's one in a Baskin Robbins outfit, which was it was pretty funny. And they all, they're all about, like, Scott's like getting looks like he's drowning by all the other Scotts, and then he hears Cassie's voice, and all of the Scotts work together to get to the top of the core, and he gets ready to shoot it, and he shoots it, but then and they all fall down, and there's like so many Scotts that are dying, and then Wasp comes in and grabs him, and then they shoot the core together, and the core shrinks. And then Cassie gets like taken back to prison, and Kang goes out to meet with Janet, Hope, and Scott because they have the core. And Janet is like, you can't give this to him. Like, he is evil. I know what he'll do. And Kang is like, I'm gonna take it from you no matter what. But do you want to give it to me, or do you want me to like kill your daughter? And Scott doesn't give it to him, and so he takes it. He just beats up Hank and Scott. No, wow, not Hank. Beats up Scott and Hope and like really easy, knocks him out. Takes Janet with him, and MODOK finds Hank and crashes the ship that he's in. And then Kang takes Janet back to his watchtower where Cassie is. Cassie breaks out of prison, goes and frees some of the freedom fighters, and then MODOK and her start chasing each other. And Kang is explaining to Janet what the threat is, and this is kind of like the biggest setup for the future of the MCU. Is he explains that he saw the end of everything, and it was chaos, and he saw all of himself fighting, and he is one of the Kangs, because there's probably more, that decided to go out and stop the incursions, like how in the Avengers Time Runs Out by Jonathan Hickman, the Illuminati go out and stop the incursions, blow up the world. In the MCU, that's Kang that does that. And I thought that was super interesting because I love Time Runs Out. It's confusing, very well written, but it's confusing, and once you understand it, it gets so much better. I thought that was super cool that Kang is going and stopping these incursions before they happen, and he even mentions incursions, so people that have seen Doctor Strange 2, that will ring a bell for them. Maybe not, only if they're as nerdy as I am, probably, but that rang a bell for them. And then he just explains that he needs to wipe them all out. And again, Janet is horrified, but he starts up the core and gets ready to, teleport out of the quantum realm. Hank crawls out of the wreckage, and he this is like the dumbest but like funniest thing ever. And I don't know if it was intentional or not. Hank finds Scott and Hope, and he's like, "Oh, I have a plan for stopping Kang." he In the beginning of the movie, it's set up that Hank has been working with these ants, and they just say they're smart ants, and he's like, "Oh, they built their own tech." I thought he was just being like sarcastic, like, "Oh yeah, the ants built their own tech, Scott, you idiot, I built it." I guess he was serious, because these ants show up and they're like cyborg ants. Basically, the ants fell into the quantum realm and experienced like hundreds of years in a day, and they became super technologically advanced, and it's like the stupidest thing ever. It is it's so dumb, but I could not help but laugh because it's an Ant-Man movie. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like such a funny way to incorporate the ants. And people will find it stupid. People will find it so ridiculous. Like, come on. But it's just like, you know what, dude? Sometimes you just gotta, I don't know. If you hate it, respect. If you like it, I understand, because I thought it was funny. And it doesn't like break the movie. Yes, it's stupid, but it's supposed to be stupid, I hope. Cassie sends out a message to everyone in the quantum realm that Kang is going to attack, and they all need to fight back. And so Scott grows really big, goes and launches a full frontal assault on Kang. Cassie is running with the Freedom Fighters and fights MODOK, and Hope is fighting alongside Scott. And then they're all fighting, and Scott gets kind of like worn down by all these ships. And then all of a sudden, all the Freedom Fighters come in and start winning. They start launching the attack on Kang's base. And then, Cassie and MODOK fight. Cassie kind of wins over MODOK and is like, "Hey, like, you don't have to be a dick. You can be something else, Darren," because it's Darren Cross from the Ant-Man movies. I guess I forgot to mention that. But yeah, so basically in the first Ant-Man, you get this kind of funny flashback where he shrinks down and he's just this head. Kang finds him, rebuilds naked Darren Cross head to be MODOK. And that's the origin of MODOK in the MCU. And so the whole movie, they're like, "Oh, Darren, you're so stupid. Oh, Darren, you're so goofy." And Kang is like, crapping on Darren, just abusing him. And then they're like, Cassie says, like, "Darren, you don't have to be a dick. You can be something else. It's never too late to not be a dick." And it's stupid. It's cheesy. It's funny. Whatever. It didn't really work for me, but it didn't bother me at the same time. It's kind of like, eh. So then she leaves MODOK lying there and goes off. Her and Scott break into the castle. Eventually, Kang's multiversal ship is the castle. So he's got his army. They all are about to lift off, and then Scott and Hope break down the multiversal barrier, and Cassie is like fighting with the Freedom Fighters, and then Scott stops Kang from teleporting out, blows up part of his like watchtower, knocks out Janet, knocks out Kang, and then Kang wakes up. And the Freedom Fighters are like launching an attack. And then after that, you see the Freedom Fighters advance. Kang and Janet have some dialogue where Kang starts crying, but he descends down to where the Freedom Fighters are, and he just starts murdering like hundreds of them. Like, he just wipes them all out, like vaporizing them. And his tech reminded me of Stark repulsors, probably on purpose because he is from the future. A lot of his tech is just so advanced, but he's like blasting them and it's like vaporizing them, killing them. He kills one of the main Freedom Fighter guys with like the lamp for the head, and then the rest of them start retreating. And while they're retreating, Scott, I almost said Hank again, Scott, Hope, and Cassie stand up to him and start fighting him, and they just get rocked. And it's a great scene. They're just getting rocked, and then finally, all of a sudden, Hank shows up with the cyborg ants, and all the ants overpower Kang. And he has like a shield going on, but there's literally like thousands of them like bearing down on him, and he's trying to kill him, but he's like trying to shield too, because he's been like kind of hit a ton by Ant-Man. And then his shield breaks and he gets overrun. And then Hank shows up and is like, "Oh, sorry, I'm late." And I thought that part, well, being stupid, it worked for me. It's an Ant-Man movie, and that was probably, it's like, if that was the end of Kang, I would have been pissed. But it's not. It's just a small defeat. And yes, like, oh my gosh, he has so much advanced tech. How come we could take out all these Freedom Fighters but not some ants? Well, there was like 100 Freedom Fighters, but there's like 10,000 ants. They do a pretty good job of showing how many ants there are and like how advanced they are. Um, and it takes them a while for them to break down his defenses, which if it was just like instantly only like 100 ants, I would have been mad. And again, if it happened in an Avengers movie, I would have been mad. But it happened in an Ant-Man movie where Kang is the big bad, of course, but also they play it off, as a joke. It's funny because it's ants beating a time traveler, but it's Ant-Man. It's in the name, Ant-Man. They got to use ants somehow, and that's how they did it. And it worked for me. But people will hate it again. It worked for me. What can I say? Janet gets the multiversal sphere portal going again, and she's like, "We have to get out of here now." So they all fly up together, and they all go out. And right before, so Scott's the last in line. Cassie is about to go out. Scott shoves her in, and then gets whacked by a blast, and it's Kang. He's up. His suit is destroyed. It's the shots in the trailer where he is like he's sleeveless, looking jacked, and just pissed, and he just starts railing Scott like. And people were freaking out because they're like, "Oh my gosh, he was bloody in the Comic-Con trailer, and then in the stills online, he doesn't look bloody." It's bloody. Scott gets the crap beaten out of him. It's a pretty brutal fight, which I enjoyed. I was like, "This is awesome! Like, this is what I wanted from Kang and Scott." It was you see Scott just getting absolutely demolished. He's no hand-to-hand fighter, but you see him showing maturity and like, sacrificing himself so everyone could go. And then Kang keeps trying to get to the portal, and Scott keeps trying to stop him. Eventually, everyone back on Earth realizes that Scott's not there, and so Wasp heads back in, and Kang has Scott in a headlock by the multiversal sphere. Scott grabs some Pym discs, slaps him like what Janet did. Kang freaks out, runs towards the portal, gets blasted by Hope, and Hope blasts him, and he ends up on the multiversal sphere, and it explodes and grabs him and presumably kills him, which surprised me. I thought this Kang was going to be our big bad Kang, but I'll get to that in a second. That was very surprising. And then, the Freedom Fighters won in the quantum realm. Kang's forces are defeated. Let's go. Happy ending. And then they go back to Earth. We get this final scene where throughout the movie, Kang makes it very clear that he has to get back to reality, to a place inside time and space, so he can stop what's coming. And they're like, "What's coming?" He says, like, "Me, I'm on my way. I'm going to destroy everything. I am the end." And so he makes it very clear that if he doesn't get back, it's going down. Like, his variants will come and conquer the Earth, or the timeline, or the multiverse. And so he dies, and they're back. And so Scott is, he's getting a cake for Cassie walking down the street. It's showing like a happy montage again. And again, this is where the tone really falls flat. It's comic, and all of a sudden Scott's like, "Wait, I defeated Kang. I defeated him, right? He's gone." But then he said if I defeated him, that bad things would happen. Everyone would die. Did I just doom everyone on Earth? Did I just doom the multiverse? No, I'm fine. And then we get a tiny scene at the end where they celebrate Cassie's birthday. He eats a piece of cake and he spits it out, and that's the movie. And overall, great introduction to Kang. Great, story for Scott. I'm sure the way they ended this, it ends on a note where the Ant family really has no resolution to them. So I'm guessing that it ends like Thor Ragnarok, where, although Thor had a character arc in that more than Ant-Man does, that leads into the next movie, not in an obvious way, but there's options for a sequel. And so I hope they do another Ant-Man movie and kind of make this one a little bit smaller, no pun intended, but also wrap up the arcs for everyone. The arc for Hank and Janet and Hope and Scott, continue Cassie's arc. And they don't need to wrap up everything, but just, give them satisfying arcs. And then this isn't the last time we'll see them, I'm sure. But so I enjoy that. And I enjoyed the story of Kang in the quantum realm and, Scott and everything. And I loved how manipulative Kang was, how dangerous he is. The only thing I really wasn't super sold on was the tone. And then the choices in the third act that I kind of referenced in my spoiler-free review are the ants and Kang taking over Kang. And then MODOK comes back. And he's like, "My name is MODOK, and my name's Darren, and I am not a dick." He breaks Kang's shield, and that's the biggest thing he does in this movie. Okay, I forgot my biggest problem with this movie for some reason. My bad. So he's laying there dying, and they all surround him, and he's like, "Scott, you were like a brother to me." And I was like, I just watched the first Ant-Man movie like yesterday. What is he talking about? And he's like, tiny arm like stroked Scott's face and played for a joke. People were laughing in my theater, but I was just like, this is the biggest example of undercutting emotion with humor. Is you could have just had like a short like, oh, like, and I'm no writer, so this is gonna sound like garbage. And I do all my videos off the fly, off the cuff, not scripted. So he could have just been like, I realize now that I had to do this. I had to stop King. I couldn't let him do that. And again, it's not anything Oscar worthy. It's not even worth like 10th grade drama award winning dialogue that I just gave out. But it's better than what we got. He says, "Oh, you're like a brother to me." His hand, and he's like, "At least I died an Avenger," and everyone's like, "Yep, you're an Avenger," which to me it would have been funny in a different context. Like if he was like, "Oh, I can't believe I'm an Avenger now," and they're like, "Yep, you're an Avenger," and then he went and died, I would have been like, "That's actually really funny." But he's dying, and then make him an Avenger, and then he dies right after, no fanfare, which I was like, it just felt weird. It felt very rushed. It felt very awkward. Probably my biggest complaint with that movie is just the tone. That's a spoiler review, and I'll get to the post-credit scene in this in a minute. But yeah, overall, same issues: tone, a few choices, and then the freedom fighter characters did not work for me whatsoever, but the humor was good for the most part. The story was pretty cool. I loved King. King brought this movie up probably like a point and a half. King and Scott, they were the MVPs of this movie, and then they did a good job. I think overall they did a pretty good job. It is back to focus again with King, and that leads into the post-credit scene. As people were like, MCU Phase 4 is unfocused, because the post-credit scene we're setting up, either, oh look, we have a trailer for Doctor Strange 2 with Spider-Man or Venom being in the MCU and then being out of the MCU. We have Shang-Chi's sister still having the 10 rings. What is that gonna be about? We have something setting up the future where they study the 10 rings in Shang-Chi's post-credit scene, and then you have like the Thunderbolts set up, which is cool, but nothing with King. And then finally we get this post-credit scene where you see a ton of people teleporting into a massive, massive coliseum, and they all are using the same teleportation device, the same teleportation device Mr. Fantastic used in Doctor Strange 2. And they all teleport in it spreads open, and you see it's King. It's a ton of Kings. And then you see 3 Kings, which I presume, the first one was Rama Tut, because he's wearing Egyptian and Pharaoh garb, which, I mean, I was like, okay, that's Rama Tut. It better be Rama Tut, or I'm an idiot. The second one, I'm guessing, was a Mortis. He looked a lot like a Mortis. He had like the same headpiece, and he had the beard. And the third one, I'm not sure. He had like line. He looked like an Eternal. He looked like he was wearing like Eternal garb. And I was like, that's interesting. And they talk about like how the exiled one was killed, and oh, I wish it was me. Like, oh, I bet you wish it was you. Yeah, for sure. But we gathered them all together, and we are late. I'm like, oh, who did you gather? And he says, all of us. The camera zooms out. You see hundreds of Kings, like thousands of Kings, all gathered in this Coliseum, like screaming and cheering. We don't know what for, and then done. And I was like, awesome. That is a great post-credit scene showing what the threat is. It's the Council of Kings. What king are we going to see next? Are we going to see Rama Tut? Are we going to see a Mortis? Are we going to see Nathaniel Richards? Are we going to see Victor Timely? Which leads into the second post-credit scene where we see Victor Timely doing a magic show talking about how time controls us, but what if we could control it? And it shows the crowd, and it shows Loki and Mobius, and Mobius is like, is that him? I thought you said he was scary, and Loki's like, he is. And then it ends on a shot of Victor Timely, boom, done. And that's the movie. So again, sets up Loki season 2, and sets up, I'm presuming, to be Kang Dynasty. Whatever movie will come next that will feature King. I hope something does come that features King early on, because I would love to see more of him. Jonathan Majors really is the MVP of this movie. He gives a standout performance. Very well done, and I couldn't be happier with his performance. Well, I may have my issues with the movie, no issues with Jonathan Majors, no issues with King. Very excited for where they're going next. So yeah, what did you think of, I almost said Kang Dynasty, what did you think of Quantumania? Have you seen it? Let me know what you thought about it down below in the comments section. Are you excited for Phase 5, and is this more of a retracking and what you were hoping for? Thanks for watching, guys. Check it out later. Take care.